Joining us now, former BYU Athletic Director Rondo Fehlberg. Rondo, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today, PK?
I'm doing great. Now, here's a chance for you to officially announce your candidacy for Athletic Director at BYU.
Well, the shoes are a lot bigger today than they were when I filled them many years ago. And I would feel like a little boy tromping around in my dad's hunting boots.
When you think of Tom Holmoe's tenure for 2 decades, what comes to mind?
Well, I think that Tom was uniquely able to do an enormous amount without ever calling attention to himself. I don't know that I've ever been around anybody quite like that.
Especially for someone as accomplished as he was on the football field and all
Yeah.
that. He downplays that completely. You would really have no idea. He never talks about it.
Well, Tom knew what he wanted from day one. I don't know how many people know this story, and I don't know that I have Tom's permission to tell it, but I will tell you that I was considering Tom. I thought I was going to be the AD to replace Lavelle, and so I went out and met with a number of possible candidates to replace Lavelle, including Tom. And I spent the weekend with he and Lori, made sure the 49ers, where he was coaching at the time, had a Monday night game, so I'd be able to be with him on the sidelines. I spent time with him in a practice, watched his demeanor, went to church with him on Sunday, went to the game with him on Monday, came back to Provo, looked at our options, gave Tom a call and said, Tom, I'd like to bring you to Provo. And he said, what for? I said, what do you mean, what for? To replace Lavelle. He said, I don't want Lavelle's job. I was stunned. I mean, I had spent the entire weekend with him. Now, we had never spoken about it, but that was the magic of Tom. He never talked about those things. He talked about everything else. And I said, well, what do you want? He said, I want your job. Just like that. I mean, he didn't even bat an eye. And I said, well, I can't do that for you, but I can get you here. And so I got Tom on my staff, and he was amazing. And the rest is history.
What's it like being an athletic director at BYU that might be different from Utah or wherever?
Well, the first thing is you've got a candidate pool that is completely different. And one of the things you have to make sure is that those athletes who are showing interest understand that, so that you don't have to talk about it. You have to make sure that they understand that there are some things that are going to be different if they're an athlete at BYU. Now, that's worked perfectly for us because our candidate pool essentially high-graded themselves.
With that in mind, going forward there, you know, the situation, talking to Rondo Fehlberg, former BYU athletic director, has changed in college sports so much than from when you guys were doing it, and clearly from even when Tom started his administrative responsibilities at BYU. The world of college athletics is so dramatically different. We had a ESPN story last week where a BYU booster said, "You will not outbid us." I mean, I never thought that I would hear anybody from BYU say that openly anyway. But if you want to compete, that's what you've got to have, right? So the new athletic director, he or she, how do they handle these challenges going forward with all the things that are going on at BYU? Because Tom has done it very well.
Well, he has, and that is the unique ability that Tom has, is he is able to get things done and deflect all of the attention elsewhere. And it allows him to be more effective because people are very willing to accept that and the attention goes elsewhere. We don't know where this is headed. I think a lot of us kind of regret the direction it's gone, but it doesn't give us the luxury of ignoring it.
Right.
And I think that's what Tom did. It didn't matter whether Tom liked it. It was what it was, and there was no way that we were going to get left to the side, because the brethren understand that the primary purpose of athletics from their perspective is to give BYU the exposure and the platform that make it much easier for the church to do what it needs to do in North America.
Yeah, with that in mind, the job will change no matter what. If he stayed or whoever's in there, the next 10 years will look different than the prior 10 years. But what's your assessment of the position that BYU is in athletically right now as we speak?
I think we're as good as we would ever hope to be right now. We've got great coaches in the marquee sports. We've got really good, solid teams, and we're stable. I mean, and don't ignore Brian in all of this. Brian surprised me. He really did. He has been way better than anybody I've ever expected him to be at doing what needed to be done. And I guess I judged Brian wrong early on. I thought Brian would be more interested in making sure he got the attention and the credit he deserved for the work he was doing. He hasn't at all. He deflects all of that elsewhere, and he's been masterful at it. In fact, that might be one of the best things BYU could do, was let Brian finish his career in that chair and get us stable in the Big 12 and ensure that the implementation of all of the current things that are going on is done. And it would be perfect. And you wouldn't skip a beat in Provo because Brian's already there. It would be terrific.
Rondo Fehlberg joining us, former BYU athletic director. When you say Brian, for those who may not know, you're speaking of Bron Santiago. And in my mind, he would be the logical choice. But at the same time, they had a lot of success choosing a former athlete in Tom Holmoe at the highest level, and you got Chad Lewis there, who's the exact same thing in terms of the athlete at the highest level. A very popular man throughout and a bridge builder for sure. Do you think he gets consideration, or how much consideration should he get?
Oh, absolutely. Well, Chad is a logical candidate. Some might say he's a slam dunk. And I think I heard you saying earlier today that Chad is in the very position that Tom was in.
Right.
And that's true. And Chad is so good. But Chad has that ability that Brian has demonstrated to do the heavy lifting without appearing to be the guy doing it. And so I don't think there's any question. And if I were going to sit down with Brian, I would want to know what his plans were for continuing to groom Chad, because Brian would be there for a limited time.
Do you think Tom has a feeling, and obviously you can't speak for him, but just like the job that he was hired to do is done, and the work that he needed to accomplish is finished in a sense? And I know he turned 65 here in a few weeks, but I'm feeling that it's more about his job is done here. You see what I'm saying? Because he needed to get the athletic department in a good position, and it looks like that's what he's done.
Absolutely correct. The next AD is going to have to ensure that none of that momentum is lost or compromised, and that the rest of the Big 12, whatever they're going to call it, the rest of the Big 12 just with a shrug of the shoulders accepts that BYU is the big dog. And that would sound offensive to, I think, the athletic communities in some of the other Big 12 schools. But that's how it is, and Brian would be great at doing that.
Going forward,
Chad will be amazing.
Right. Going forward, what do you think is the most important requirement that whoever gets the job does?
Well, I think BYU's athletic director is unique, and the athletic director has to understand that his first requirement is to ensure that everything that they do and that we do as an athletic department and a university is consistent with what the church wants and expects, and moves the church's agenda forward.
And how do you do that through athletics?
You make sure that you know how to drive between Provo and Salt Lake.
So there's that much interaction in that position?
Oh, yeah.
To the point of, I mean, it's not. I don't want to say overbearing. To
No,
what
not
level?
at all. In fact, they keep themselves consciously separate. Your job is to know, not necessarily to ask, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Is that tricky though, or is it just more natural?
Well, Tom did it as good as it could be done.
Right. But I'm just wondering, when you start, the more people involved, the more personalities involved, and does that make the job, any job really, more complex?
Well, there's no question that as you add people to any equation, it complicates the process and elevates the visibility of the outcome, sometimes more, I think, than the brethren or than BYU would like.
Yeah, but it's part of the deal.
Yes, absolutely. And we don't want to be out there beating our breasts saying, hey, look at me, we're BYU. We want other people to draw that conclusion and be saying it for us. That's what we choose to do. That's how Tom did it. And that's what needs to be done going forward. We don't want to be telling people how great we are and how solid all of our sports and coaches are. We want them to draw that conclusion and be telling everybody else.
Rondo Fehlberg joining us. Were you surprised? Did you see that quote where the booster guy said, "You will not outbid us"? That caught me by a little bit by surprise. I'm okay with it, but it still caught me by surprise that it was that public.
It caught me more than a little bit by surprise.
Okay.
I was stunned.
All right, so I'm on the right path and thinking the same thing. Obviously, I've been around the BYU people for many, many years, and so we're thinking alike. And when you say you would have more credibility than I would, when you say you were stunned, why was that?
Because we just don't do that.
Right.
We don't have to tell anybody we're the big dog. We're the big dog. We know we're the big dog. We want them to go ahead and talk about it, but we don't want to be telling them that. In a sense, when you tell people that you're the big dog, you imply a little bit of insecurity that is unbecoming of BYU.
So were you okay with it? I mean, I was okay with it.
Well, it's like scattering the bag of feathers. No, you go pick them up. I don't think I want that job.
But at the same time, don't they have to do that? I mean, they may not have to say it, but don't they have to do it if you want to be competitive in today's world?
We know what we have to do, and we will go about doing it. And whoever follows Tom will do that. But we're not going to go around telling people about it and beating them over the head with it. It's just not the way we do things.
And how comfortable do you think they are? Because the story here with this number one recruit in basketball is the fact that he's a non-Latter-day Saint, African-American, and the powers that be, I would think that they would welcome that. What's your impression?
No question. That's huge for us. It's exactly what we want. And I love it when Dibanza comes to Provo and then goes around telling people it was better than he expected. And gosh, it was so neat. I might want to spend more than 1 year in Provo. I mean, that kind of stuff you can't make up, and you can't do that yourself as effectively as other people can do it for you.
Yeah. Rondo, we thank you for your time. Very much appreciated. Go ahead.
Bet.
Finish off.
Thanks. Oh, I was just going to say, there are a lot of great athletes all over the world who are paying attention to BYU now because of Dibanza.
Absolutely. No question. Thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate it.
You bet. See ya.
Oh, okay, that's Rondo Fehlberg. Coming up next, one of Tom Holmoe's first hires will join us. He's Dave Rose. He will join us when we come back. Stay with us. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.